Welcome everyone to DIGFM. My name is Eric Matthews. And before we begin with the main presentation, we probably have some announcements. Who would like to make any announcements if you have any? We'll try to keep it within about 5-6 minutes.
Well, I can jump in. John Howell here from Data Experience. An opportunity arose about a month ago after I had found the ideal retreat center for a West Coast pause on error, and then I found out there wasn't going to be a pause on error, and I found out the best thing to do is me to gather a team and put together an event in lieu of that. So we now have an LLC called Full Access LLC, and we're having an event on October 20th to the 23rd in Los Altos, right near Claris and Apple headquarters. We've got a team of 14 people so far. We've got our own Slack channel planning this. We formed an LLC. We're using Rike, W-R-I-K-E, for project management, for those of you who are familiar with that. We have very talented FileMaker and web developer in Kentucky, Ron Cates, who's building the back-end event management system, so that for I think the first time I've ever been to one of these events where all aspects of an event, signing up, paying, scheduling, volunteering to a session, everything's going to be in one place on a WordPress front end with a FileMaker back end using the Data API and a custom plugin to allow people to see everything that's going on. Even going to have QR codes to show you where your room is and where all the lectures are. Very exciting. It's all coming together. We're opening up for a few sponsors. We're going to start selling tickets on March 31st. We're waiting until Engage is over, the Monday after Engage. And the cool thing, this is going to be a 4-day thing. It's going to start Monday morning till Thursday afternoon. Room and board, food, meals, snacks, and we're not really doing merch, but we're going to give everybody a nice jacket, a journal, a pen, and a name tag. And it's all going to be under $1,000 complete. All you got to do is get there. Some rooms are going to be double rooms, and they'll be like $900. Single rooms are like $995, and then for commuters who can come for the day, it's less than $700, and that's for meals and everything. So it's really affordable. It's going to be a diversity of classes, including AI and JSON, and we got a lot of senior developers. I've been reaching back channel to. I've got emails out to almost 250 people, so people are starting to show their intention to sign up. We haven't opened up ticket sales yet, but we're looking for 3 sponsors. Claris probably be one of them, probably, and open it up to speakers of all levels. Of course, senior people, some of you bright guys, and we're also trying to make room for newer, younger people. I'm getting older, and I want to kind of assist the next generation to come along and take over and continue all this wonderful stuff we've been doing, some of us for over 30 years. So we want to encourage people of all levels, but there's going to be some great technical sessions. Also some interpersonal sessions, like a class on public speaking, one on project management. We're kind of taking the theme of pause on error and making it very close to that, but also bringing back the spirit of the old FileMaker developer conferences, where you went there and you're all in one place and you could rub elbows and build relationships and network and have a real all-in-one experience. It's on a 38-acre Jesuit property called the Jesuit Retreat Center in Los Altos, California. 32 acres of that is hiking trails, which are beautiful, with all kinds of benches, lots of meeting rooms. We're trying to make this a very tightly, professionally organized thing, yet for the infrastructure, but creating a lot of sense of spontaneity, so it doesn't feel super structured, like there's a lot of freedom, but we have a great infrastructure. And like I said, we got 14 people. Every week we have a group meeting, and then I have 4 other meetings to make sure that everything's coming together well. We're looking at all the different viewpoints to try to make it like the best event that we can ever imagine. We're very excited about this. This is coming together very well. There's all kinds of details to go over, but I'll be doing that next month. So I invite you to look at the link that I put in the chat for previewing it, and you can submit your email just to show interest so we can reach out to you. I'm sending out one-on-one emails to hundreds of people to invite them to consider doing this and attending and or speaking. and a few that might want to sponsor. I'll take any questions anybody's got it, but that's the general overview.
Hey, I'll jump in. So it sounds like you're well organized. John, you used to do, I remember hearing about events that you organized, I don't know, 20 years ago.
Yeah, we stopped doing them 15 years ago, but a little over 20 years ago, I started doing FileMaker Bootcamp or Bootcamp for FileMaker, legal registration, in my home in Thousand Oaks near Malibu. We did that for 7 years, and it got bigger and bigger, and FileMaker started supporting it. We ended up at Pepperdine University for a while. We would rent halls there, and I stopped doing it. When I saw Pause on Air come along, I thought, well, these people are much more organized, and technology is growing, and I can't teach it the way I used to teach a lot of the classes, and we'd have volunteers from FM Disc come in. But I stopped doing it. But then when Pause said that the people from Proof Guy said they're not going to do it this year, I thought, this might be my chance to do this. To be honest, this is like my calling. It's like I'll just be candid. There's a lot of prayer involved in me. This is my calling. I'm having more fun doing this than anything else I've ever done in my life. This is what I want to do with my life, is throw events to encourage introverts, computer people to build social interpersonal skills, learn technology, create a place where they feel welcome and they can socialize, and all of us get out of our cave. There's nothing that I do in my life, and I've got quite a social life, that's anywhere near as fun as this. So it's taking all those old skills and then everything I've learned from everybody else in the last 15 years and doing it on a whole new day. I'm not in the front ground. I'm in the background. I'm kind of like the glue holding it together, but I'm trying to promote other people to give presentations, to lead, to take authorship in coordinating this thing.
I remember when my first, when they call it not engage, DevCons, you were one of the speakers many years ago when I used to go.
Yeah, a bunch of times.
Any other announcements? All right then. Well, today the presentation is from Robert Naud. Yes, you pronounce it his Naud name, Naud. What else can I tell you about him? Let's see. He attends our group when he can. He'll help you to understand. He does everything he can. That's why I call him Dr. Robert, making him the only person I know who has both a theme song written by the Beatles and a James Bond movie named after him. As for his FileMaker and other interests, I'll let Dr. Naud describe all those things to you starting now.
All right. Thank you very much, Eric. I'll be sharing my screen. And here we go. I'm starting this presentation. All right. So thank you for everyone joining. We are going to be having a discussion today about the features in FileMaker. So and whether we are using them, planning on using them, not using them, and how we're using them, why we're using them, or why we're not using them, and all of the things in between. So I really want our discussion to be really like a roundtable type discussion where we have this poll that lets us hop from one feature to the next. So basically, I'm just going to go to my next slide here. So for the poll that I just talked about, you have options. So you can go to menti.com and use the code that's at the top of the screen, or you can also simply use your smartphone and scan the QR code that's on the screen, and then you will be landing into the Menti portion of the poll. And once you're there, if you can hit the thumbs up, just so I know that most of us are on there. And before we move on to the rest of the presentation, because if there's just 3 of us answering the poll questions, then it's not going to be as interesting. So And if you need during the presentation, I can bring the QR code back on the screen. And the code is going to be on display for every slide that I have for the presentation. So awesome. It looks like we have a good number.
What?
I'm sorry. Yes, Eric?
I attempted the link, that FUVI ending link, and it didn't put me right back to the beginning of that. I'm wondering if it's...
But your page should show joinmenti.com by QR code.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right.
So, all right, because I'll be moving on to the next slide as I'm changing slides, what is on your device should change as well. Okay. So there we go. That's just a slide to say hi. I think some of you may have heard from me in other DIGFM presentations, and if you have not, well, today we get to meet. I guess that's what I would say. I started Accolade plus Accolade in 2019, and yeah, that's where I'm at still today. And I've been doing FileMaker development since 2005 or so. Now, our objective today is going to be to really take a quick look at what do we have in our toolbox, and what tools do we turn to, what do we use them for, and what tools may we be more often than not leaving on the shelf to gather some dust, and should we brush up that dust, or do we feel like we just don't see a reason why we'd pick it up. So the overall idea about this presentation came from a tidbits series where the author was introducing features about Apple products, so it could be the device themselves or the OS for the Watch OS, the iPad OS, the Mac OS. And he was basically saying, there's a lot of features that are being released constantly, and it's difficult for the average user to just get to even know about some of them. And as he was explaining what one feature was about, he wasn't sure if people were using those features or not. So he started making little polls here and there, and I felt like that was a great idea, and I was curious about, what if we were to do something like that in the FileMaker space and say, hey, what is being used? Is this something that no one else is using? Is this something that a lot of people are using and I'm missing out? So yeah, I'm just trying to see that we get something that lets us have a rough assessment of what others are using or not using, and try to discuss on the why aspect of all of that. And I think that's really something that picked up since Claris went agile. And yeah, so usually my presentations go around 60 minutes, but I've heard that it is now trendy to go around maybe 100 minutes. So all jokes aside, we have a fair number of features. So yeah, just simply wanted to get us to look at those things together. So feel free to interrupt, ask questions, comment. Some features on our list today can be on the obscure side of things. It would be a bit pointless to ask me, are you using the set field command? Are you using go to layout? So of course, the features that we're going to be talking about are features that are more on the recently introduced type things, and maybe the things that you're not going to have in every single of your scripts or layouts and so on and so on, but that you may have bumped into every now and then, and yeah, so that's what we want this discussion to be about. And yeah, just if we end up learning about features, then all the better, right? So first of all, we have a question here that says, okay, I code mostly for solutions relying on what version of FileMaker? So basically, if most of your time you are leaning with 21, you can answer that. If something, and we didn't list all of the existing versions that are out there. So 18 or prior, and then 19, even though 19 is no longer being supported, it reached end of life somewhat recently. So I felt like it was relevant to have it in our list today. So we get a rough idea of what's the split of what we're dealing with. So I see that a lot of us are using the latest version. So that's great. And yeah, let's go on to our next slide and talk about transactions. So for myself, I've not touched transactions for the longest time, and then Carbon came out, and I said, oh, that's something I need to have on my radar and make sure that I get to use it someday. It took me much longer than I would have liked to end up rolling it out. And when the new transaction script steps were introduced, I was thrilled because I was like, oh, this is going to be much easier and will bring people who may have been shy to implement transactions to say, okay, well, there's an easier way to see that your edits in your file are all packaged into a single transaction where everything either goes through or fails, and then you get the rollback on your data. So yeah, I'm just curious to figure out if people have been using it or not. So the way this is going to be our first question. So basically, we are gathering the answers in mostly three categories all of the time. Do you use it, or have you used it already? Are you planning on using it soon? Or is there no plan in sight? Okay. And if you've used it and figure you would not use it again, then you should answer no plan in sight, even if you've used it already, right? So just so we get an understanding of how people are using it without turning to stuff like frequency and things like that. So let's look at what it looks like with transactions. If we say used already, and if some people want to talk about how they are using it and what they like about it and what kind of use case or scenario they use it for. I know that on my end, I have a system where recently I was really glad that everything I did was using transactions, because turned out the server was having some stability issues and it would crash every now and then. And I was just happy that I would know, okay, even if something bad happened, right? It's not like half of my thing would be gone through and then I'd have to be dealing with some data being there, some data not being there, and have to say, oh, what do I do with this messy data? I could just say, okay, well, it crashed. Let's just reopen and resume where we left off, basically. So yeah, I see that we have half and half used it already, and or plan on using it, and some are just not there yet, I guess, or maybe just not planning on, because it's one of those features, right, where we get to say, well, it was not in the product for all the time that I've been doing FileMaker's or whatever, and be like, well, my my stuff works, right? So some people, just like when JSON was introduced in the platform, same thing, right? They could say, well, it may be nice, but I'm not going to change how I do things just because it's now part of the platform. So yeah, I think that's one of those. All right,
Of course,
so I will.
Used it for one little thing. I just used it for one little thing myself, but where I really wanted to make sure that the whole thing, because it had to do with deleting records and stuff, so I wanted to make sure that everything was clean before went ahead and said it did something. It's like events, I guess, right? You've given whole presentations on this, right?
Yeah, I did quite a few. Robert, I'd be curious of the people who said they use it, how many of them use it on a server, or they use it locally?
You mean within PSOS or something like that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I use local.
It's mostly local. Although sometimes if I do send a process to the server and records are getting modified, then yeah, it could happen within a transaction on the server, but it's not my first go-to preference or something like that.
Okay. Because that's mostly how we do it. We normally edit the record originally, which was globals in a popover. Then it turned into globals in a card window. Then it turned into the local file.
Local file, yes.
Yeah, and the local file, then we just package up a JSON payload and then send it to the server and transact it on the server.
And that is something to mostly get improvements on things where if you were to do the same, but over WAN, right, the performance would not be anywhere near what you get by doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah, the transaction, like if you're on a LAN, the committing the record, so in some cases, when I lived in Germany, it would take a whole second just to commit the record. And on the server, it was like 1/10 of a second or even less. And so sending the payload to the server, transacting the record, literally the record would be open for a brief moment. And so you'd have very small likelihood of collisions. Transaction would get done. Plus, the other thing that we look to do is denormalize data. So not only were we doing the transaction, but we would also go and find unstored calcs and turn them into stored calcs. And so at the time of the transaction, the only problem with that is that you can't do that at the time of the transaction because the data that's uncommitted is not visible to, records that might need to aggregate not only the records that exist, but the new data that's coming in or the edited data, right? So it's almost like you have two transactions, one after another almost. But then again, it's another way of looking at it is looking at it as eventual integrity rather than transactional integrity.
That part can be very challenging, but sometimes you can also do things where you will be able to get to your aggregate data. It's just you need to maintain it in some type of a variable, right? Maybe a global variable or something like that, and you'd be able to get to what you need even before reaching your commit. But yeah, if you want to say, hey, I want to know the state of the data and the data has not been committed yet, there are things where committing first could be an easier way to get to know where things landed. So
yeah,
and you don't have any issues with like having too many server-side sessions at the same time on the server or anything like that.
Well, that's the other thing that we would do, but I haven't done this in a while. But we would monitor the number of concurrent PSOS sessions. So we would be able to, because the transactions are very focused, and because they're run on a server, they run very quickly. So there is overhead in issuing PSOS because it's a session that you kind of invoke to run on a server. However, even with all that, we weren't, and very busy systems, we weren't seeing a lot of overlapping activity. So transaction, like a PSOS session would run, it would take, a second or less, or maybe a couple of seconds, but we wouldn't see like, you're hitting the limit of the number of concurrent PSOS sessions. I think sometimes people, when they took advantage of it, when it was first coming out, I think they tried to push too much into it, and the script was doing a lot and running for a long time. And then if people run other things and they also take a long time, they overlap, eventually you run out of the number of concurrent PSOS sessions that you can run. And then you get that error. I forget the number, 813, I think.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for sharing on that. Let's see. I think on our next slides we have other things that are tied to transactions still, just things that were introduced more recently. So this one is about the ability to now skip auto enter options. So basically, as you know, I'm sure, if you need to update existing records, in bulk, without altering the records, last modification timestamp and all of that stuff, the way you'd have to do that would be pretty much to design a dedicated import script that would just do the import without the auto enter options. So now you can actually write a script and use the transactions to say, well, everything within that transaction need to disregard auto enter options. So it can be very handy, to me, I really was, frowning every time I would have to do that little import dance thing. So with this, I feel like I don't know. I'm happier. I don't know if everyone is happier or not, but yeah, I'm really glad that they introduced that feature. I don't know if anyone wants to share something on this specifically.
I just have a question. When it's skip data entry validation, we're talking about field level validation in the schema?
Yes.
Does anybody really still do that?
I do.
I haven't used field level.
Still do that as having validations at the field level?
Yeah, I always do it scripted. I just try to stay, because it can get a very kludgy experience. I'm just wondering if that is actually used by people. It's just kind of a question for anybody.
I know I rely on it. I mean, there are things that I will validate by script, but I see the script as almost like an interface to the data layer. I think, the data store, the FileMaker backend is really what's in charge of ensuring data integrity, and data integrity is something that I'm more likely to try and handle in the fields. But everyone's, if you are very thorough about making sure that everything that writes to your record use the same script all the time or things like that, then yeah, you can totally rely on something scripted to enforce your validations.
I use it certainly on legacy systems. Could be considered a little bit of a line of last defense, in case something gets through your scripts was There's a little bit of an echo. I don't know why.
Maybe have everybody mute.
Okay.
I think you should be good, Tony. Try again.
Okay. All right. Good. There was a little bit of an interesting question that came up on community this week, relevant, which is drag and drop. So there's a use case where, like, if you have a field on a layout field with checkboxes, and if you have drag and drop on, because you think it's, that's a useful feature, right? If you drag something unusual on top of the checkboxes, it will enter. And so I looked at that. There was a blog post by Geist, which I think you can find by auto enter, this and that. And it was a good blog post. I recommend looking at it. I think auto enter is a good way to clean up the data before it gets validated. So I'm just kind of throwing out a couple things for thought. But I think validation, yeah, it's messy, but stay tuned for an upcoming feature.
Mm-hmm.
But I would use it last line of defense. Leave it at that.
Yeah, and it also depends on, what is writing to your data, because if everything happens through scripts, then fine. If you have some things that are happening over data API calls, then you'll have to be sure that those calls are giving you the data in a way that is consistent with what you're expecting. So again, just trying to say the field definition is really what is there to make sure that that the data matches what is expected. So okay, well, but because I think there is something else that talks about validations a bit later, but on the auto enter, if I was to ask everyone, have we used it already, or where do we stand? Just curious to know, because it's fairly recent, I think, in terms of when it was introduced. So I'm really surprised, to see those numbers. No plan in sight. So I guess for those people, the import method is just fine. Or maybe they don't bump into those situations. I don't know, but for me it was really handy. All right. And for one more on the transactions, we're having set revert transaction on error. And that is something where basically today we don't really control when an error happens within a transaction. And I say today, I mean, now we do control, but before that was introduced, we had no control. If an error happened and the error was forcing the transaction to fail, we would just automatically be reverting the transaction, and the script flow would be resuming after the commit step, right? So this here introduced something where you can say, well, I want to be taking charge. Okay, I don't want to get kicked out of my transaction yet, even if there is an error. So I think one of the most frequent use I can think of would be if I suspect there's going to be a high likeliness that I would be bumping into something like a record lock, right? Maybe I want to wait a little bit and retry instead of aborting the whole transaction. I'm not sure if I would be able to come up with a bunch of other cases where I'd want to use this, but I totally understand, the use for introducing a feature like that. So again, anyone feels like they want to share something on this before we get to the vote? All right, so let's just ask everyone. So on this. So of course, if you were already not planning on using transactions to start with, you're not really likely to use this here altogether. But all right, so there we go. We've got some numbers here. So PSOS with callback. So Vince was talking about doing transactions with PSOS. There could be a bunch of things that can be done with PSOS. We're advising against things that could take a long time, but sometimes there are those things, right, where you say you want to ask the server to run this long process or to do this report that requires that a lot of data gets aggregated, that you wouldn't want to be doing that client side. So, but if you do ask the server to run a script for you, your options were to say, okay, well, don't wait for any result. Okay, in which case it's just you're literally just sending data, sending your request over the fence and not caring about what happens next. Or you'd be saying, no, I want to wait for the result, and then the script would do its thing server side, but you would be there waiting until it's done. So PSOS with callback lets you have your cake and eat it too, right? You get to say, okay, well, I'm not going to wait for your results, but whenever you're done, call me back using this hook, right? So, and on here, I wrote some things where we have parameters and things like that, and it's a bit funny because I don't know for those who have or have not used the script step, but when you're using it, my first inclination when I was using the whole setup with the callback script would be that the callback script would be receiving a script parameter when it runs, and instead of watching for an incoming script parameter, you have to watch for a script result, and that really threw me off. And I think the callback script, you can give it a parameter from the initial session client side when you're calling the PSOS script. It's just it needs to be almost like hard coded or something like that. It's not going to be reevaluated, when it comes back. So that's why I wrote like, what do you use this for? Because I'm curious. I myself, I end up not using it at all. But if some people are using it, I'd be curious to know how they are making use of it. So
the parameter, I have, like with a lot of the perform script on server, I don't like having a whole suite of scripts. I like to have a single script that does everything. It'll like initiate, it'll perform the part that's on the server and perform the callback. And I'll just give it different parameters based on what I want it to do.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, there I would probably put the like if it was the part of the script that was the callback, I'd put in callback in the parameter, or if it was the part that was actually running on the server, I might put PSOS in the parameter. So it knows where it's at in the process, and then it runs that part conditionally in the script.
I see. And in that case, you don't need to refer to something like a variable or anything. It's just every time it's hard coded, and then it lets you deal with that on the incoming side. I see.
Yeah. One thing I was having problems with is I think I tried using the callback and the I guess as the parameter for the callback, I tried to use the script result from the one that ran on the server, but I guess it doesn't work that way. So I was like, wait, why isn't this working? But
No, I think it does. I think you can
really?
get the script result from the thing that runs on the server, but you need to ask for script result within the callback, which is, again, like I said, to me it was very counterintuitive, but
Oh, no, I tried to put it in the call to the script. I tried to put it there. Not inside the script.
yeah,
So
so it would have to be inside the callback script.
yeah.
So close to the top of your script, you'd say, like, instead of doing get script parameter, quite literally, you do get script result. Then
Yeah.
you get the result from whatever ran server side. So
Right. I tried to get script parameter from the call to that script, but yeah.
mhm.
So I use
Cool.
this one pretty extensively, at least in two areas of my solution, where I've got a dashboard that aggregates like probably 30 different data points. And the complaint was, oh, every time I navigate to this dashboard, I just pinwheel. And it was because I was just using perform script on server with wait for completion on. And it doesn't take super long, but it takes like 5 to 10 seconds to run. And they just sit on the dashboard waiting for it to load. So what I do is I aggregate the results and then set a timer in the global field somewhere and basically just say, hey, if this hasn't been refreshed for 5 minutes or something like that, then run the script. Otherwise, don't run it. It's not a dashboard that needs to be always up to date. So I can just call it if it's just a little bit out of date, and they can just continue doing whatever it is they're doing. And then at some point, the data just updates in the dashboard. So it works pretty well for that. I also have another area of my solution that has a super intensive kind of handoff between the client and the server, where we're putting together a medical exam packet with like 27 pages of paperwork and embedding a QR code on each page and uploading that into an AWS S3 bucket. And it can take anywhere from like 30 seconds to like almost 2 minutes to put that packet together. So that's another place where I use it, and that's really been a game changer for us, because they used to sit there, the users would just sit there and wait for 2 minutes while the script ran. Now they can just complete the process and then go off, do something else, and then at some point the packet gets completed, and then it goes off to another queue somewhere else. Where that one's been a huge lifesaver for getting people more productive. Now, I will say for this one, be careful, because I implemented this about the middle to the end of last year, and all of a sudden around December, we started running into all kinds of stability issues with FileMaker server, where the server would just crash, it would become unresponsive, and I finally got to the point where we had to go to Soliant and ask them to take a look at the solution, figure out what the hell was causing this, because it would basically cause the server to freeze. You couldn't stop it. It would corrupt the databases and basically force a rollback to a last known good copy. And turns out that there is a bug in FileMaker server 21 that if your client that calls the perform script on server with callback disconnects before the callback is complete, that can cause the server to crash and become unresponsive. That's confirmed from WIM. I've got a test build where they've fixed this bug, but I don't know if Claris has acknowledged it anywhere, but it certainly was part of the issues that we were having with the stability. It was tied to our backups too. So we had to migrate to VSS backups, which helped solve some of the stability, but not 100%. So,
and in the first scenario you described, it's a dashboard update, and the dashboard update is silent, right? So basically, as it comes back, I guess you are opening a new window that the user is not going to see, and then you do your data updates, and then you just dismiss the window, and that's it. Or
I load the dashboard itself has all of the aggregated values just stored as global variables. And so I don't even have to open a window. I just basically, as soon as they visit the layout, I check the last time that the stats were updated. If it's more than 5 minutes ago, I fire the perform script on server with callback, and they can just go off and do whatever. And then the next time they visit the dashboard, it's either up to date or it fires another refresh, and then it updates whenever the callback is done.
Okay, but the callback runs something on the workstation.
Yeah, it's the only thing the callback does is it runs a script to update the global variables. I just fire that and just update it via script. The context doesn't
I see.
really
They're
matter
globals.
that much.
Yeah, so you can do it from anywhere and you don't run any risk. So that's good. Because that's the thing, you have to watch for, because if the callback comes back in and you're elsewhere than expected, right? It can be disruptive. You don't want to be impacting the user's navigation and things like that. So that's why I think PSOS with callback ties in really well with also the system notifications, I think, that were introduced somewhat recently. So yeah, let's just check on our.
Guys,
Yes.
I have another technique that could be useful on this current topic. By the way, thanks. Hi guys, I haven't seen you in a while.
Hey, Keith.
So basically, you can create instead of using the callback mechanism, which will cause, waits to your clients, and it will be painful. I would stay away from that mechanism if possible. And there's a couple ways you do it. When I was doing my testing, I created a sync mechanism that would allow two clients to talk to each other, to the server and the client to talk to each other, basically allowing them to sync for whatever activity. And what you do is you have another table. If you want multiple clients to sync with each other, you create a record on that table, and you have one worker doing work for the other clients, and then the other two are waiting for it. And all you do is set a flag in a field, and when the master is done with the work, then the clients can see a flag that the master sets that says, I'm done with the work. And you could set a field, do whatever you want to do, and then the clients can see that answer.
Do the clients have to keep polling for the answer updates, or?
Yeah, and what you do is you set a 1 second pause or a 5 second pause, and there are ways to force a refresh. The pause will force a refresh of that field that you're looking at for the table. So that way you can get that answer back and see when to continue. That technique can be used for dozens of things. I've played with it, and I've created scripts, phrases that different computers can talk, and literally use text to speech and have one computer say something, wait for the completion of that phrase, and then another computer picks up the next phrase and says it. So it sounds like an ongoing conversation. And it proves that I was in FileMaker QA, so I had to prove that communication between the machines and updates were happening. And it's kind of an easy way to verify that record notifications and other things are happening at the same time. And I did performance testing the same way, have a dozen computers or 100 computers wait for everyone to finish the previous tests. And once all the tests have been finished, because as each one finishes, they would set that field, and a user would lock that record until he updates it and then gets out of the field, and the increment count ends up at 100 users, whatever your testing count is. And then once it gets to 100, the orchestrator of the test can say, okay, everyone move on to the next test. So
Okay.
I've used it for dozens of things.
Mhm.
And
So and just so I understand the part that's on the workstation, like you make a new window and you have like an on timer script trigger. Is that it?
you don't even need to. You could do it based on, say you're trying to relieve the client and allow the client to go off and do whatever he wants to do. You could, whatever screen he's on, you could link that, am I done script to a bunch of the scripts that are on buttons on the screen. And when the user clicks on one of those, it can go off, check the server. Oh yeah, that activity was done. And then it can continue with whatever activity.
Mhm.
So that way the user can go off and do whatever activity he wants, or you could have an on timer. There's just kind of like an endless list of possibilities where the client then has control, as opposed to you waiting for that callback to occur.
Yeah, but I mean, we're waiting, but we're not frozen waiting. We're waiting, and eventually the callback's gonna.
You are waiting for a callback if you set that flag, and this allows you to get away from using that flag. Where that a guy, who was it, James, who said his users were waiting for 10 seconds for the completion of that, and this technique gets rid of that need to wait. The user can just go off and do what he wants to do.
Yeah, but when you perform script on server with callback, it doesn't wait. It's like as if you had the no wait option, and then you just resume whatever you want to do. So I'm sure if you implement something another way to say, hey, I'm going to create a record and wait for it to have a flag, then yeah, you can also do that. I just think there is some convenience about the callback, because it saves you from having to set that up. Tony, you have a
Yeah,
you've raised
let
your
me
hand?
this is sort of similar related topic. One of the techniques that we've used to good advantage over the years, going way back, is a robot computer.
Yeah.
So we're certainly, and this may be exactly what Keith is saying, or this may be similar. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll say it and then we'll sort it out. It's I mean, this goes way back before the PSOS, Perform Script on Server, existed, and it has advantages. The latest implementation, you have a record queue, which can be flexible in terms of the task and the timing, even, can be rather robust. And running a robot client side will often give you access to features that don't exist. And just one closing thought on this: the first time I saw it implemented was, a user would click a button and an email would go out. And when the email went out, there would be a record created on the client side in a portal. And then the robot would take it from there. And when the email was successfully sent, it would populate a field. And, picking up on Keith's point, due to the baked in features of the client server architecture, the setting of that field by the robot computer would, in a fairly timely fashion, populate the field. Well, it would populate the field. It would, in a timely fashion, become visible to the person who clicked the button and said, hey, I want to send an email. I don't actually want to send an email. I want you to send the email because I want to get back to what I was doing. So I hope that all made sense. So long story short, robots for the win.
Yeah. Jeff and Jimmy, I gave them a technique when they first created the FileMaker store to basically have a series of robots wait for financial events. Like the FileMaker store goes off and a user says, I want to buy this stuff, and I've created my invoice and the invoice is all done. And at that point, it goes through a series of back-end activities, gets validated for sale, and actually has one machine with a bank transaction plugin. I forget what that thing is called, but it has the transaction, and it says, I want to charge this guy, and I want to, once it gets charged, it can actually, the robot picks up and says, let's see, how does that work? So basically, there's a controller box that goes through and says, he assigns a particular robot to that activity because that plugin is only on that box. So there's a bunch of other activities like emails and other things. So the invoice goes through all these things like charging and then emailing the person a message that says, yeah, you've been charged and you're going to get your item on so-and-so date, whatever. There's a bunch of other activities that it does, but each one of those activities is handed off to a different robot, one for emails, one for this financial thing. And this same concept is being used for that type of thing.
Good.
So yeah, it's actually really powerful.
All right. So yeah, let's see for the one version of that involves the callback, if people have been playing with it or not, or if they prefer turning to bots or things like that. So see where we stand in submitting. So that's a good number of people who used it already. And some who, again, have planned the site or plan on using it soon.
What I would be interested in the answer to that. Oh no, this is the PSOS callback. Going to the previous one, there's a bunch of people who have no plan on using the relational scripting stuff. I forget what your slide was called for that. But it's the previous...
the transactions?
Yeah, transactions.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in knowing if they've looked at it or not, and are they making a particular decision not to use it.
Well, sometimes the holdback could be the version number, but in our list there was a fair number of people who were on the latest version. So my guess is, again, on transactions, I mean, some people can speak to that, but it's one of those features where it's introduced, but people have a code base that is like existing, and unless they see a very intense motivation to start changing that, they're going to say, well, it works. I'm not going to change it. And then in how you see like new elements coming into your solution, sometimes you're going to say, okay, well, this is something where I can integrate new features, or sometimes you're going to say, well, I wanted to stick with the way the rest is done. So yeah, I don't have any specifics there, because I'm not one of those who were saying that don't have any plans in sight. But if some of those with us who voted that they were not planning on using transaction want to say a few things, perhaps that could give us some guidance there.
Yeah, I was wondering if people picked up on the flaws of the scripting. The scripting hasn't been fleshed out. It's not solid. And I'm wondering if they're running into those issues or not.
Well, I think Vince tested pretty heavily as far as transactions go.
Yeah, I did quite a bit of testing at one point. What was the question specifically?
Are
Sorry,
you
I don't.
are you using it or not? And if you're not, then what's stopping you from it? Do you not need it, or is there something blocking you from using it?
Using which one? Sorry.
Back at transactions, I believe.
Oh, transactions. No, I use it all the time. For me, at least.
And there's nothing blocking you?
The only thing that I wish we had was I wish we had a magic bullet, and that magic bullet could help convert unstored calcs to stored calcs via just an auto enter feature. Auto enter on transaction this calculation and settle it at the time of transaction. Right now, there's, like I was saying before, I think before you joined, Keith, and you're well aware of this, that if you have new data and you have existing data, and you want to roll up numbers to some dashboard, the new data that's coming in the transaction, you can't aggregate the new data along with the existing data until the data is committed. And so if you had an auto enter calc that said include any other data that's not available yet as part of this data that relates to it, so aggregate it as if it exists in the schema, so to speak, right? And I think if you do it with SQL, it's possible, but SQL is not something that we want to use just for performance reasons.
Yeah, most other databases don't differentiate between stored and unstored.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, everything is
Available.
is unstored. I mean, you calculate it at the moment that you
Run the query.
need the information.
I see.
So
Yeah.
I actually find that making a difference. It helped us for decades when computers were slow, but now that computers and networking is actually fast for the most part, I'm not talking about WAN, of course, but there are techniques to get the server to do the work and then just give you the answer. And FileMaker's not really taking advantage of those situations. It likes to download the world.
Yeah, download the world. Yeah. So yeah, I honestly, again, it's hard for me to speak for the people who are maybe on the fence or not using transactions. But like speaking of the first times I'm using it or things like that, I think one thing that is not making it easy is this kind of strange space where there's no clear understanding of like what are the types of errors that are going to make the transaction fail and revert, and what are the types of errors that are just going to keep the flow going. Okay. And I know that they've introduced set revert transaction on error, but it's an all or nothing type thing. I'd like to have control on saying, okay, well, here are the errors that are okay to ignore, and just those, and the rest, if anything happens, then I'd want it to roll back. But it's
yeah, there would have to be some sort of script step that presets up the rule set beforehand.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
here's a list of fields and tables, and this is what I care about and don't care about. But if you're talking about being a real database, quote unquote, okay, that it is an all or nothing in every single database on the planet. So transactions are rigid in every database on the planet. You can't put stuff in data integrity is exactly that. the schema owns what is
what gets inserted in the
what's
database.
valid
Yeah.
and what's not valid.
Yeah.
And anything other than that is not valid.
Cool. I want to keep going on the features because we have a fair bit of a list. So on still in the theme with PSOS, something else that was introduced recently was PSOS. I'm going to say within PSOS, meaning that it used to be before server 21.1.1 that if you were having the script step perform script on server within a script that itself was already running on server, the step would error out. Okay. And starting with 21.1.1, if you have that same script and call on perform script on server within a server session, it spawns a new session, right? So that sounds, very interesting. I have not been using it, and I'm just struggling a bit to come up with use case. I know, I've shared information with Vincenzo recently, and he was telling me about a blog post from Beeswax where there was some kind of a use case that was leveraging a feature like that. So I don't know. I'll bring up the slide for us to vote. I don't know, Vince, if you want to speak a little bit about that. If others want to say something,
I can tell you how I think I'm going to use it.
This. Yes.
Well, because I have like several scripts that run in sequence normally when they're run on the client, and I just pretty much I do something similar when I run them on the server, except I run them in I branch them into two different threads when I run them on the server. But some things have to finish before other things finish. And what I would thought would be really nice is as soon as one of those scripts finished, that would allow some other script down the road to go ahead and start right away. Because I could do another perform script on server and not have to do polling or robots or anything else on the somewhere else to figure out whether or not that was done. I could just spawn off another thread and have it go complete that other task while everything else is still finishing.
And that's the whole purpose of using the PSOS within PSOS is to literally split the work so all the work gets done faster. But then there's some responsibility there. You have to know that the work has been completed. So the main script has to know that everything is ready by the end of the script. Or at the right time, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so in this case, as soon as the script knows it's past a first step, the initial step, it knows it got past that step, then it just goes ahead and it runs the next one. It doesn't even need a condition to know that. It finished the script. Next thing you do, perform script on server while you go run everything else.
Okay. Well, I see a number of people who answered don't plan on using it, but still it is something to remain aware of because, like I said, if your scripts were counting on the fact that the step would just error out, as soon as you end up migrating to 21.1.1, that will no longer be the case. So you may have some code to revisit when you reach that version, because your expectations are no longer true at that point. So yeah, let's look at what we have next, and that is configure local notification. So I got here a screen capture from the dialog that comes up when we set up that script step. It's I think it's the one with the most specify options that you can have as separate calculations and everything. So and I think it's great because it's something that we get to call on that people are already familiar with. Other applications will have those notifications, so we can leverage that. And also, it's not disruptive, right? So we can notify people about saying, hey, you know what, the process on the server is done with whatever your report is now ready. Click here to go, look at it or whatever. So yeah, I'm really glad that this made its way on the desktop app, because it had been in the product for some time, but it was limited to iOS. So yeah, anyone wants to share a few things? I think there are some gotchas about that feature, because we're relying on things that are dependent on the workstation's settings, right? Like, are notifications allowed for this app, and what's the format of the notifications? Are like, is this allowed, and so on and so on. So
Yeah. How do you?
What happens when there's an error is also not the same. But yeah, Vince, you were going to say something?
How can you test that the user had turned those notifications on? Is there like a get function to say the user has turned on the system notifications for this app?
I don't, from recollection, okay, there is no get function that will give us that. But if you call the step on a system where it's not allowed, you get an error, and it's based on the error code that or not. Is it there? Or it's either that, or if you have it.
I guess you could on login, you can just welcome the user with a notification, and if that notification goes through, then you don't need to tell the user like, oh, by the way, you need to turn on notifications. So yeah, I guess you'd have to run a notification to be able to get it. Is what?
Yeah, let's just check on the. I believe the help says something about it, so I just want to.
You just can't really rely on it. That's that being there, right?
You can't rely on
it. You don't have control over it. It's a workstation preference that is out of your hands, right?
It's in scripting. It's totally in your hands. You lock down your solution, they can't script it.
No, I understand. We're talking about the system settings. Is the notification allowed for this app, right? And if it's disallowed, there's nothing you can do within FileMaker that's going to make it be allowed.
Can you enlarge your browser screen?
You mean, can I make the text larger?
Perfect.
I gave the link to that actually in the chat.
Okay. So yeah, I'm just looking for what happens when there's an error.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I've been out of the loop a little. I thought this was FileMaker notifications, not the system-wide notifications.
Yeah, no, sorry. It is something that is OS level. And it's great and it works, and it's the same call both on Windows and Mac. So I'm really thrilled that this was introduced. So right now I'm just glancing quickly. I don't see. Oh, there we go. So one of the following values, notification not allowed. Notifications are disabled. So basically, you have to specify a script. So that's the thing. If you don't specify a script, then you can't get that back. So it's just there's something strange about it, but there's options for you to know about has it been enabled or not on the workstation. So, all right, let's just get back onto here and present again, and onto question. So I know I've used it. So let's see within our crowd here. All right, so looks like a fair number of people are planning on using it. So
Yeah.
that means
So I
there's
suppose
interest.
that is like your script needs a certain chunk of functionality to do whatever work. And those buttons on the side are dialogues that come up. So you can post your own message that says, what do the buttons on the side of that script step do?
They can call back a FileMaker script.
And there's no messaging or anything like that?
Messaging, I don't think so. You can decide what the title and the body of the notification is. And for the rest, you have like button labels and things like that. But yeah, it just on the button click, you can say, hey, button click needs to be calling back this one action. But it's the same script for every button. So yeah, if you're not calling back a script from the notification, then you won't know if the notifications have been enabled or not. And the other thing is, you may have to test for that, not in the script where you're calling for the notification, but in the script that you're calling on the button press. Which again, there's some things there that are not exactly intuitive, but yeah, you end up not having to watch for the error code after the script step. And what else that I want to say about the step? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things in it. It really deserves some attention because, like we say, there's some gotchas, but once you've ironed out everything, the finish is really an interesting experience for the user. Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is you can even put in a delay, right? So the notification doesn't need to be shown now. You can say, okay, I want to, let's say we're talking about tasks and the user is snoozing it. Well, you can say, okay, that we'll give you a notification in 15 minutes or whatever. So there's really a lot of use case that this can cover. And that brings us to our next feature, the loops flush option. And to me, that is, I'm going to say the scariest feature. Basically, the one I'm most afraid to start changing anything in my script. So basically, I leave it to the default setting. It's a feature that gives me the impression that it was not designed for the kind of use that I have, and if it was, designed for something that I'm dealing with, I guess I would know about it or something like that. So the helps for loop is not really helping us understand what this is about, but there's been an engineering blog article. So the link down here points to that. So I don't know if people feel like sharing about this, if they have a use case where, changing it to minimum or to defer ended up, giving them some benefits or ended up, putting them in trouble, whatever. But for me,
So it sounds like performance versus reliability then?
Well, versus reliability, again, if you're using it in the way that it was designed, I'm guessing you're going to get, performance increase, yes, and it's not going to be any less reliable than what you need because it's going to do what you need it to do. But for me, I'm just going to stick with always flush as you iterate. So
so one of the advantages of FileMaker is that as you're doing work in scripting, you're getting notifications, and if you you'll get those notifications that records have changed, and therefore, at the time that your script is run, your values that are in your current record are up to date. So therefore, you'll whatever your script does on those values is valid, correct. This allows you to say, turn off the notifications while you're doing this work, and you'll end up possibly having invalid results. So this is a script that is stuff that you really need to use judiciously and under conditions that you have set up some measure of control over.
yeah, my understanding was it was like mostly impacting you when, like, if you're looping on records and as you are doing that, you're looking across a relationship, well, every time you change record, you get updates about what's across the relationship. And then if you change the flush options, what is across the relationship could be more static than what you would like it to be. But sometimes there is a price to pay to get those updates, and if you just don't need them, right, then you would just say, okay, let's switch this over to minimum or to defer. It's really a feature where, to me, I'm like, well, I don't want to risk it. So
you could get to a situation where you're making a decision on whatever the other table is. Say it's, have I shipped something or not? If I've shipped it, I want to do this set of logic. If I haven't shipped it, then I want to do this other logic. And you may end up double shipping or not shipping at all or whatever based on your logic. And so, yeah, you need to have some sort of level of control and know that the way that you've scripted your stuff is going to be solid no matter what. But otherwise, yes, this is going to be a huge, possibly huge performance gain. So use at your own risk type of thing.
Yes. Very, very good word of caution there. So, and here we're getting into semantic search. So again, something introduced recently that is very, I'm going to say, trendy. If you have not heard about it yet, most likely, you need to subscribe again to what's on Claris mailing lists and everything, because it's all over the messaging these days. So yeah, just, I have not used it, so I'm not the best person to talk about possible use case and everything. Curious to know if there's some amongst us who have been using it, how they're using it, the kind of gotchas they may be running into, or the things that they expected and their expectations ended up being, a little bit aside from where the reality ended up being. So yeah, anything you feel like sharing, I'm really curious to hear about.
No shortage of presentations on it.
Yeah, I implemented it in the latest version of Inspector. The way it works is actually there's two AI features. One is, and it was really easy to implement actually. So the first one is a lot of people think that they need to send the XML to AI, but that can use up like a lot of tokens, and I mean a lot of tokens. And so what we do is we generate a textual representation of the script, and we send that to AI. And then we ask for a summary of what the script does, a one-sentence summary, and like a concise summary and a longer summary. So the longer summary is like a few sentences long, and the short one is just one sentence. Then we take the summary, the long summary, and we generate an embedding based on that. And then we can allow the user to semantically search their scripts. So, if there's a script that does some user sign up process or something, and you might refer to a user as a different word, but it relates to it. It's just the semantic meaning of what that user is. You can search for it by meaning, and the way we do it is I think you can set a number of what is the cosine similarity value. Like if you set it really high, you might not find any data. So what we do is we set it really high, we do a find, and we want to return a certain number of records. And if we don't get anything back, then we go into a loop and we set the cosine similarity value a little bit lower. We do the find again, and then if we get close to or about the records that were requested, then we exit the loop. So we're doing...
That's nice to know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think something nice is that the record set you get in the end as you perform the find is sorted according to how strongly correlated with the search criteria the records are, right? It's not like, hey, here's 10 records that match your find, but they're in creation order or something like that. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah.
So that's very neat, because it means your quote unquote most likely hit is going to be close to the top or something like that. And I think there's a lot of that would match users' expectation, right? We've been trained to that just with every Google search we do, right? It works this way. So I think that's something very nice. So yeah, let's see if we have people who have been using it or not, or plan on, or used it already. Vince, you said you used it already. So, all right. So it looks like it's on a lot of people's to-do list. Very good. So our next feature is something where it ties into AI, but it's been in the product for longer, I'm going to say, and it is embedded machine learning models. Okay, so that is something, I don't know if you were at DevCon when this feature was introduced. But it was kind of a wow moment. Basically, in a keynote, on stage, the people from Claris took a picture and asked to describe the object, and obviously they had a model that had been trained to recognize some specific, I think it was car parts or things like that. So that's great. But I think, speaking for myself, I feel like this is a very niched feature, meaning I most likely won't go look for existing models I could use in my solutions and embed them, or not even train my own model or things like that. So, but still, it is, maybe some people will be revisiting, something like that, saying, hey, you know what, AI is getting more and more trendy, and there are things that we could achieve with a tool like this. So just curious again if people have been using it, if people have not been using it, and all of those things. So let's see where people cast their votes. So all right, so yeah, we got people who plan on using it soon. So that's interesting, and I guess that this interest is something that is, I'm going to say, provoked by the surge of everything AI that is in the news. Cool. So, and no one amongst us who have used it already. So we'll see what that ends up with. And data file script steps. All right. So for this, I have to say I just recently started using this, and it's not something that I'm going to basically. I think I would not use it at all if the server side we could do export field contents or something like that. It's a set of script steps that I'll use to circumvent the limitations on the server without having to turn to a plugin. But other than that, I have not been doing much. I know some people they like outputting things to file, for logging purposes and things like that, and maybe they rely more heavily on those script steps. So for me, it's just I just didn't feel like I needed it much until I end up needing it, and then again, like I said, if the feature was supported server side, I probably would not even use it. But I did learn something in a session from Engage that I attended last year from an employee at Beeswax, and they said they were using this as part of the local file technique that they are using, and one of the side benefit is that as a replacement to export field contents, when you use this, there is no on-screen progress bar for the export, so it's more, I'm going to say, silent than the export field content script steps, and sometimes I feel like in the product we should have the option to say, hey, I want to suppress the dialogue, especially for insert from URL. There's a lot of things that we're doing where it's not like I'm downloading something and I want a progress bar. I'm just interacting with this API, and I don't really want that to be in the foreground for my user to experience a progress bar. But so I don't know if we'll get there. But yeah, that's what I have to share on the data file steps. I see Tony has his hand up.
Yeah, hi, thanks. At the last meeting of DIGFM, it came up as a topic, so I just dropped a link to it's just a couple minutes. I think there's a lot of use cases for the data file script steps. I'll get into that in a second. So I started an infographic, which is what I do when I'm trying to figure out the best way to implement a particular feature. It's only version 3, so it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. The goal of an infographic is to just document all the different script steps, functions, maybe script triggers, and how they would synergistically work. It's always good, why do I care? One of the use cases that we've done a lot, we'll get a request from somebody for an export that's not vanilla. Like if someone says, can you export a column of data? or rows of data rather, that's like, okay, yeah, I can do that. But if you're exporting, for instance, to Magento, you want to sort of build up the text in FileMaker and then write to the hard drive. And traditionally, we've done that with AppleScript or the Base Elements plugin. To be able to do it native is good. And then I think the final thought, and I know it's coming up on the list, is I believe that there's, features that pair well together. Coming up soon is set error logging. And for that, I would say if you're using set error logging and you want to take the error log of whatever it's called, script log, whatever, I've got to go look up the name, and import it and bring it into a help ticket system. Anyway,
Okay.
infographic version 3 looks useful to me.
Cool. So let's see what people say about data file script steps. So
Yeah,
on my end,
just an FYI,
where I stand. Yes.
extremely useful. You're going to fill up your hard drive with this. It's going to be much larger than you might think.
All right. So things to watch for.
Keith, you're going to say you're going to fill up your hard drive if you turn on the set error logging? Is that the thought?
Yeah.
The set of
Wait till we get
steps that he just listed has the possibility of filling up your hard drive.
Yeah. But
So-
at least FileMaker is now FileMaker, right?
It's a text file. Those script steps are text files.
Like FileMaker didn't become a FileMaker until which version?
I don't know that you can. Okay, I was there when those were being implemented. They're text files, but I don't know if they implemented a redirect mechanism to put them into a table or not. They were thinking about it at the time, but either way, it's going to either be on your user's hard drive, or if you can redirect it, like take the text file and import it into a table afterwards, that file can fill up your hard drive. You just have to be careful about using it, the feature.
Okay, very good. So monitoring the space it takes, and then because we don't want to have the hard drive just explode and being full and saying we can't write anything anymore. And in here, it looks like we have a good number of people who have used this set of features here for data file script steps. So that's interesting. This here is not a script step at all. It is just the open quickly interface that we now have in the product, and there's been tweaks. When it was originally introduced, the little toggle that we see on the right to say limit the search to the current file was not there. So it can do a lot. It can scan into your recent files, favorites in terms of just opening a FileMaker file. But for the files that are open, it can, look for scripts, layouts, and things on the relationship graph. So there's really a great deal of things that I feel like this is helpful. If you have not used it yet, I would strongly encourage for you to look it up. There's a keyboard shortcut for it, and there's also it's also available in the menu. So anyone wants to share their thoughts about this? I think on my end, my only frustration right now is just that when I am trying to list something, if the string I'm looking for is short, somehow it starts by listing the longer values, and then the shorter values are at the bottom. So I often need to scroll all the way down. But other than that, I'm really glad this was introduced, and it's also a feature that I can easily think will evolve over time. Like they will perhaps introduce some types of filters, right? Where we could say, okay, just layouts colon, and then whatever you search after that is going to limit the search to just layouts and things like that. But
like little check boxes or something. Yeah. But yeah, I still wish it would show me like which server it was running, because I may have two different instances open on a test and production, and it doesn't really tell me which one it's. I can get two different
because your
listings.
files are named the same, right?
Yes.
I see. Yes, and if they're the two of them are open in the same FileMaker process, right? Then yeah, you're going to run into something like that. But you could use some commands to spawn a completely different instance of FileMaker Pro on Mac, that is, and then like use one of those instances for just your production set of files, and the other instance for just your dev or staging or whatever you have, and you get that separation.
Yeah.
Your current calculations, what is that feature called? So a calculation inside the viewer that gives you the file name and path and so forth will do that until Apple or until FileMaker actually does something like add that.
Oh yeah, but yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose of the open quickly when I can't quickly discern which server it's coming from.
Yeah, but as a developer, you can have that always sitting on the right.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, but in the thing is, in the output from the open quickly, it's going to commingle everything together, and it makes it hard once everything is into this one list.
Got it.
Yeah. So
it's the list that you want the information in, because you'd have to open it to find out where it is, which is kind of dumb. Yeah.
So, and at the same time, it's just, depending on your server name, like if we are to prefix everything with the server entry or something like that, it could end up being very long to on just the displaying part, and also it could make it look like the hits are not tied to what you typed to search. So yeah, I think I would really recommend that you fire off two FileMaker Pro side by side, and then use one for just the set of production files, and the other one for the development files that you have. So, and let's see. I'm expecting that we're going to have a lot of people using this already, because we had a strong number of people who were using 21, but I'm a bit surprised that we still have like 43% of people saying planning on using it soon. So, okay, well, again, up to you to discover that. But sometimes those features, right? If we're not paying attention to the messaging that is coming in a set of new features and everything, it's there, and it's kind of like silently waiting for us to stumble on it. And yeah, if you don't see the messaging, so it can be hard to get onto that. This one is an interesting one. Constrain Found Set find without indexes. So my understanding is, how sometimes we're going to say, oh, let me just do a first find and then run a Constrain Found Set after having found a first set of records, in thinking that it's going to be quicker, because the thinking is then that it just has to scan the records that were already found It's not really how it works. Basically, your second query that says constraint found set is still going to require access to the index, and since that is all server side, right? It can't really say, oh, let's match that with the found set that we have clients in. So it does the query server side first, and then when it has, to my understanding, the matching records that are found, then it intersects with your found set on the workstation to say, okay, well, these are the only ones that apply. So it can be very slow in some cases if you are doing a constraint request after the fact. And by being able to say, well, I just want to run this find without indexes, then it can improve the performance, as if you're, instead of relying on a constraint, looping over the records and say, okay, does this match my criteria, yes or no? And if not, then omit the record. So yeah, just doing it in a find instead of in something that loops or everything. So I've not run into cases where I end up having those fancy requests, and I also have used transactions to make sure that I have more of my data as fully indexed and not unstored and things like that. So yeah.
You're basically removing workload off the server, but this will be slow if you have to download millions of records just to look at the field content to see if it is going to be constrained or not. So FileMaker is using C++ to walk through the records and say, should I remove this record from the list or not? Constrain it, remove it.
Yeah. But my assumption is it then only relies on the found record. So when you say downloading a lot of records, I would assume that by then it's going to work with the records it already has.
Right, but if it doesn't have them downloaded, you're forcing records to be downloaded.
But only the ones from the found set.
Right, but if that's a million rows, then you're...
Yeah, if you have a million rows in your found set and then you say constraint on that, then yes, it could be taking some time, just as if you were looping on all of them, right? So...
Right,
So
but that's a C++ loop, which is going to be faster than a FileMaker loop.
Understood. I was using the looping analogy just as an image, not to say that one is the equivalent of the other. But
it's a good analogy, though.
Mm-hmm.
C++ is faster than FileMaker scripting engine looping through records.
Oh yeah. And if you already have the records downloaded and they're in the local cache, then I expect it's going to be somewhat fast. But if it has to fetch the information to start with, then So
and
hey, we have our first 50-50 here. So, and anyone else wants to vote? Because I don't think we have
only
many
two people
voters on this
voting.
one. Or maybe we can just skip on to the next. So
wait, how can you tell who the count of users voting?
Down in the lower right.
The lower right hand corner, it says 4.
So you need one more vote to get a tiebreak.
I can also split to say, okay, instead of showing percents, I could show like this, So yeah.
So that I think it's a good thing to use, knowing that your record counts are low. So if you have 50, 100, or 1,000, pick a number for your solution that works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So execute FileMaker Data API. So that's the script step. Okay. So not talking about, are you using the data API from, some other outside service, just, a lot of people have tried to make comparisons with, using execute SQL and saying how does it compare, because both of them are kind of context independent. It's just execute FileMaker Data API still needs you to create a target layout, so basically it's going to have like this invisible window where it's going to go to that layout and retrieve the data it needs. So I ended up not really using it as much as I thought when it was first introduced, just because most of the time I already have scripting that will, in the transactional fashion that I was describing, having its own dedicated transaction script to write to the record or to read from the record. So I end up calling on that instead of calling on execute FileMaker Data API. But there are things that are very interesting, especially if you are in need of retrieving both, say, the parent record and child records. Then it can, you can just put a portal on that layout, and you're going to get child record information coming through. You will have to control, like if you have many rows, there are elements of the query that are meant to say, okay, I just want I think it's 100 rows by default, and if you need something else, you need to specify it. But yeah, it's nice. It's just I don't end up really relying on it much. So just curious about what other people may share about this one.
It adds complexity that you must handle. So
well, of course, because those layouts are things that you need to maintain. If you say, hey, I need those other fields too, right? You need to add them to the layout.
The found set and all that. So you're looking at the possibility of getting a larger set of records than what your allowed search is allowed to download. And then you're talking about memory and other limitations and whatever. So again, use at your own risk type of thing. So if you download through FileMaker Data API, some million rows, and you're only allowing 1,000 rows at a time, and you do some statistics based off of that, you're doing statistics on 1,000, not a million.
Yeah. But I think it can work great, like especially if you are retrieving a single record, right? If you say, oh, I want to retrieve by record ID or I want to edit by record ID, then I think it's a great way to great technique to leverage. But yeah, if you need to process data in bulk, you have to pay attention to what limits each of your calls have. Or sometimes, it could let you, because of those features of the query, right? If you want to say, hey, I need to take this data set and make a pagination for it. Well, pagination kind of comes baked in with the data API. So yeah, you can rely on that or leverage that. So what do we have next? Layout calculation. So I have shied away from using them in their first rollout, I'm going to say, because I believe if you were to rename whatever you were pulling in, let's say a field name or a function or so on and so on, the function would break, the layout object would break, and there were also issues with like if the calculation was defined in a different locale, in a different language. Like for instance, if you are using FileMaker in French and the layout is being loaded on an English workstation, some of those things would not be recognized. My understanding is most of those things have been fixed, and I did rely on that in a few occasions, and it was really nice not to have to go through what I would describe as hacks, just adding a calculation fields to the table, or, doing a button bar where I would define a calculation, and so on and so on. And something that's also really nice is you can use that actual layout calculation syntax as a button label in the button, not the button bar, but the real button, right? We know that the button name cannot be calculated, but the button name does accept something like merge fields and merge variables and this here, which is also a type of merge. Yeah, it's a tool that really opens up a lot of possibilities. So I'm really glad that it was introduced. Let's see.
You've identified the main issue with it, which is it's treated as text. It's not treated as a calculation.
So if you change that field name, it's not going to change it on that calculation?
No, that has been fixed.
Calculation.
Oh, so that has been fixed.
Yeah, but there are things about it that won't and can't be fixed. Like the language thing. FileMaker always loads up two languages. The language that you're in, like if you're in a French copy of FileMaker, it loads up that, and English. Always loads up English. So if you write the calculation in English all the time, it will always work. But if it's partial in French and English, and you go to another company, Germany, or another country, and you go to Germany, then the calculation parts that are written in French won't work.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, so there are things to watch for if you want it to be universal. But like I said, on my end, I think it's really working out well. It also does things that the button bar won't let you do, because it's closer to text merge, right? So if you have something, for instance, where you want to say, oh, I want to invoke something that's going to output a date, but then use the text formatting options that we have to apply a date format, then that will work. So there's a lot of great things that you can do with it. And if you also use some things where you're going to say, okay, let's define this calculation and then name the layout object for it, and then use get layout object attribute. It can let you retrieve things with the formatting, right? As opposed to say, well, this date and this number is this, and you if you want the formatted version of it, you need to invoke other calculations to make sure that the actual string ends up looking like this. So there's really great things that this brings to the table. I see Tony with your hand up.
Yes. All right. So let me jump in and a couple things here, picking up on what people are saying. When this feature first came out, my thinking was, how does this compare to a button bar? And the initial VREV didn't entice me. So I can't say I have a definitive understanding. I was hearing what Keith said about layouts are text, and they're, as opposed to so you do layout text or layout calculations, or you do text in a button bar. I did do a beauty contest between those two, button bar with no fill. And it was like, I'm happy with the button bar. It seems if the button bar uses the calculation engine as opposed to layout calculation being text, I'd imagine by virtue of the features of the calculation engine, you pick up multilingual support. That seems like a good thing. Picking up on what Robert said, there is the ability to format text, the data formatting, whether it's number formatting for currency or, some sort of date formatting. That's 100% true. And I would also say that there are some pretty good custom functions up on Brian Dunning's website that definitively give you the ability to format dates and numbers. Those are the things that if you have text, you want to be able to format. A bit of a suite of custom functions for that. And then I think the final thought on the formatting, it is a good feature. It's very non-granular in that if you have a block of text where you want to format the date, and you pick a date format, it's monolithic, that it'll format every date in that way. Better example might be a number, where if you say, oh, I have a number, I want to format it as currency. And that's great, except if you have another number in the text block. Last I call from
percentage
texting. So I would just say, and this is all for conversation, that I like button bars and I like the custom functions that give you the ability to format dates that have uses elsewhere in the platform. If you're generating letters and so forth and so on, those are good to have in the wheelhouse. I like button bars.
Yeah, and to make what I said clear, calculations are stored as tokenizations. So 1 + 1 is stored as the value number 1 plus a token that represents the plus signal and another number. So when you store it as a tokenization, you get the full rich conversion from any language to any language in the calculation, and you get all the benefits of being inside the calculation dialog. But this is raw text. And all the conversions and all the other stuff that would normally happen that you see in the defined fields and so forth won't happen. So yeah, it's a good feature, but I wish they would have implemented it as a calculation object instead.
Okay. Some challenges there, perhaps. Let's see, what do we have next? Oh yeah, the one that is next is something that puzzles me a bit because, speaking for myself, I will almost never make a new layout. Most of the time I just end up duplicating an existing layout and applying my modifications to that. But apparently someone somewhere must have been in need of having a default theme for new layouts. So that was introduced. So when you are managing your theme, you can say, okay, I want to, set this as the default for new layouts. So yeah, is it my custom theme or another theme? And then every time you make a new layout, it inherits that distinct theme instead of whatever was there before. So yeah, for me, it's not something that moves my needle, but other people may feel differently. So I feel like we can get onto that and just ask people, for their own feedback. Me, I don't plan on using it, but just curious about if there's other people who feel strongly about the default theme implementation.
FileMaker always had a default theme, but there was no way to
make any edits.
No, to knowingly control which was the default theme. And this feature just forces a rule. The user selects what the default theme is, and that's it.
Yeah, and even within the theme, there are things that it's hard for us to control. Some padding values. I can't recall the things that I was trying to have control over in something that I did recently, but there are things that are just defined this way, and then you
that's a different feature.
Deal with it. Yeah. This one is something that I was really, really thrilled when it was introduced, and I really was thinking, well, why wasn't this implemented any earlier, right? So,
exactly.
So what it boils down to is that in the field validation, so we spoke a little bit about field validations earlier, and we said, well, some people like to rely more on scripting, and some people will say, well, the field definition is really where you want data integrity to be enforced. So if you are setting up a field validation, when the validation fails, there was an option for you to output a message to the user, right? It just so happens that that message would be pretty much hard-coded there and couldn't really adapt to circumstances. It couldn't be calculated and then say, oh, here is the message that we're going to say. And this has changed recently. So if you've missed it, go in and look. This is not an Easter egg or an April Fool's type thing. It is part of the product, and I've been using it, and I'm happy that's in there. So yeah, just asking people how they feel about it all, and let's see. There we go, and voting.
What version was that?
Tony will tell you that.
It's always a really good. It's actually. I have seen people in community request that FileMaker or Claris do what they used to do. 13, they did a table. They being Claris did a table where they listed their features. I don't know off the top of my head when this feature shipped. I do think if Claris is listening, a bit of a change log would be useful. Just publicize what you already have internally, and make it easier for people who are managing clients who have
different versions.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's the real world. I have clients who send FileMaker quite a bit of money, and they're not always on the same thing, so it makes it hard to sell upgrades. Anyway, I did some work in that a while ago. I have no plans to do that.
To be fair, when I'm looking for something that is like a change log, I'm looking at the release notes, because now that they are pretty much having them in a single page, right, where you have many versions and you just need to expand or collapse, makes it easy to scan for a given feature and see where it was introduced or things like that. So in this case, that's what I would turn to. But yeah, your mileage may vary, right? Sometimes it could be something you'll hear in the new features or things like that. Sometimes it's something that you'll have to fetch somewhere else.
You have to work a little extra hard. I mean, yeah, you could look through all the release notes. I actually once built a page and I sent it to the individual. I don't like to use names, Claris, because, top secret witness protection program. I sent it to someone who was in charge of the documentation at Claris. He's not there anymore. I think he retired. And he was like, this is great. Because, the goal was to be able to lay out for customers the advantages of upgrading. While I'm managing client installations where I'm doing quite a bit of work to discern what version of the operating system they have, if the IT people have upgraded this or that, and so forth and so on. And so, yeah, I mean, release notes are great. That's wonderful. If I go to, and I could pick some off the top of my head, set error detail, which used to be called set ODBC, which is now, that's like a script step that's had 3 different names over the course of time. And this is just from memory. From FileMaker 16, they added the ability to get, if you have a record lock, you can get more than just the error code. You can get the details on the error code. You can determine who's locking the record. So, knowing at what version something shipped and at what version there was a VREP, that's useful. Or let 10,000 developers across the world all figure it out themselves. That seems inefficient to me.
Hey, Tony.
Yes, sir.
It's not what you want, but it's better than release notes. If you go on to online help, there's a available since field, and it says the version number that it was added. It's been there for like 10, 15 years.
Yeah, when we're talking about a very specific feature like a function or a script step, right? But when we're talking about a feature that was modified, like in this
the
case,
naming. Yeah, the naming.
the validation, that you can now do by calculation for the dialogue or things like that.
It's be able to search for the old name, and then
for the old name of field options.
In the online help, search for the old name, and it would bring up. But I don't think you can.
Yeah, and that would be.
I wouldn't know what to look for in terms of the old name for this, right? Because
Tony's an old user, and he's bringing up the fact that he's old and he's been with the product for a long time. So he's just saying the function left was not originally left, for instance.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So
yeah, set error detail.
Yeah.
I'll go look it up. But set error detail used to be set ODBC. So you might be looking at a code base, and let's be honest. If a customer walks in the door and says we have a system that was built by someone internally, let's say, can you work on the system? And we're currently running whatever they're running. I'm not going to argue with them about. I'm immediately going to try and add value to their situation. But anyway, it's a little bit of a rant, and I'm happy to leave it at there.
Agreed. Because I tested the product for 35 years, and I've been through 2, 3, 5 name changes for everything.
So it just makes it a little confusing to know what's going on, and it sort of puts the burden of it puts, in my opinion, it creates a little bit of friction. I always like to phrase it on, if you have 10,000 developers around the world, do you want them building code, creating value, or do you want them trying to figure out and document the product?
The old system, yeah.
Yeah, so and with what we have on screen now, this is something that has, again, been introduced recently. I'm not sure that it has a designated feature name, and I mean, there is a link to the help about where we talk about it. And I think it's a great improvement to security to make sure that only files on the same host can access files, that you can't just start creating a file on your desktop and then say, hey, I want to point to this other thing where I've got credentials, or even if you are full access, or even if you were to retrieve a file that was authorized from the server and have that locally on your device and then say, hey, I need this to connect to that other thing. So I was going to say, I really don't see a reason why not to turn it on until I started thinking about the local file technique that Vince is telling us about all the time. So I don't know if that is throwing a wrench in your things, Vince. I guess, are you still with us? If you are using the local file, the two are kind of
incompatible,
mutually
exclusive, right?
Yeah, I'd have to double check with this because I don't remember now.
Hopefully it doesn't complain about local files, and it's
I don't think it's
not.
Or maybe you don't have problem because in your case it's not the local files accessing the hosted file, it's the hosted file accessing the local file. Could that be the case?
No, because I think we do have things pointing, like the hosted file accesses into the local file.
Really?
Right. And we establish a variable file reference. We deploy the file, we establish a variable file reference, and then the table of occurrences from the local file are instanced on the graph in the hosted file. So would that apply? I'd have to double check this. I can't remember if we have this setting on or
Yeah,
not.
that seems to be okay, because what I'm reading here is a file that is local cannot have an external file an external data source
Yeah.
that is on a different host, but your local file is not having a data source on the hosted one, right?
Yeah. I mean, it might be just that we
It says
we
if this
haven't.
file is local, all authorized files must also be local to access this file.
But that's what it's referring to, the main file. If this file, meaning the hosted file, right, is local, then all
Yeah.
authorized files must also be local.
Yeah.
But I'd have to double check. I can't remember.
Mhm.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be a good rule. I could see the rule where you want everything that is hosted should be together as a hosted group of files. And I could see where you might want the local files to reach out and talk to remote files. But you're trying to block, server to server communication, like dev versus non-dev,
Hmm.
type of situation. Or
Yeah, I'm sure there's different use cases, but yeah, to me, I feel like, well, the files I trust, I've already put on the server, and if there are files that are not on the server, I don't want them to be able to start poking into my files that I'm hosting. That's how I interpret this whole setup. So
as a separate checkbox, I don't mind having the don't allow local files, because you may want to say some financial thing should never be local. It's always hosted. You may want to be sure to block certain files, but then there's files that you purposely craft, like Vince crafts local files all the time to do work locally, and then push that data up to the server. So I see that this is not implemented correctly. I see this as.
yeah, I'd have to try it to know, because to me it feels like it's going to work the way Vince is rolling it out. So yeah, but there are things to watch for, and one of those is also to make sure that even if you have that checked, it says the current file and all files authorized to open, it must be opened by FileMaker 21.1. So if you don't also enforce a check, by saying, hey, this file cannot be opened by something lower than that, then you can kind of defeat this mechanism by just saying, oh, I'll open it with FileMaker 20 and then I'm good to go. So
exactly. It's a flag that only exists for a future version to read. So other versions don't read it, so therefore you can't block it in older versions.
Yeah. Cool.
Oh, I lost my ability to vote. Sorry. So I'd have to double check on this. So I abstained my vote.
And Vince, it's your fault. It's 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah. So set error logging, I think that's the one you pointed to, Tony.
Keith.
So yeah, basically I'm not using it. I think it's really tied to having a file locally on the devices, and then for me, I ended up when I am logging, I just create a FileMaker table and I have things logged to that, and that's centralized. So that's what I want to have. I know Vince also cares about centralization. So yeah, it was introduced, and Tony wants to say something.
Yes, indeed. And I have a present for everybody. This looks useful for troubleshooting. I mean, it is useful for troubleshooting. So I did a bit of a deep dive on this one. Let's see, from memory, it gives you 7 columns out of the box. And then 8 is freeform, custom debug info. So I made a custom function, which I'll drop into the chat in just a minute. And I called it custom debug info. And basically, it's a huge collection of get functions, a little bit of design functions, because I believe if you're building a help ticket system, and I would kind of characterize this as something that you would want to import into a help ticketing system or help request system, you would want to have the script ID, because there may be a change in the script name between the submission of the help request, and the fulfillment of the help request. So script ID versus just script name, layout ID versus just layout name. Anyway, I'll drop the custom function. It's just basically every possible get function that would be useful in determining where did this error occur and what was the conditions, the state of the script from which the error was written to the log file. And into the final column, column 8, it's a JSON object. So even though you only have one column, by virtue of JSON, you have the ability to put 100 different values and then import the one row and then just parse the heck out of it. And then when you're analyzing the nature of the error, you'll be able to you'll be able to figure it out because of all the data.
I guess that means you're the one who's going to vote for using it, right? Because
actually definitely used this. Had an issue with a script that was 3 hops. It was hippity hop, and it's just very convenient, and it's a good feature. Kudos to the people at FileMaker.
Yeah.
Hippity hop. Okay, that's 3 hops.
That's the
or is it 2? Is it 2 hippities and 1 hop?
Yeah, and if you use this, I would create a custom script that you can turn logging on and off with. And if you're working with a particular user, I would go into a calculation, a custom function that turns it on and logs for that customer. Otherwise, you're filling up everyone's hard drive in the group.
Absolutely, totally agree. Yeah, like account names, filter account names, something like that. Totally agree.
Yeah, so you can change your custom function in your solution to say, turn this on, and if you're John Doe, then have it go through your custom script step that says, if my special case matches, then go off and log this information.
Yep.
And then sprinkle that all over the place, and then it will skip logging for like 99.9% of the time. You could even tie it into a feature in your solution, so it's only logging in whatever your feature set is in your solution. You can name everything and do stuff that's appropriate for your solution.
Yeah. I think there's also some, I'd have to go look from memory. There might be some constraints as to what your privilege level might need to be to set error logging. But Keith, the idea that it should be selective is true. Turn it on, figure out the issue, turn it off.
And you're responsible for turning it on. You're not asking the user
to
turn it on.
When this came up in the real world, and there was a script that was, that I didn't write. If I had written it, it would have worked. And I was just like, it was, 3 different scripts, logic spread all over the place. And it was an efficient way of figuring out what's going on. Anyway, good feature.
Mm-hmm. So, Eric, tell me, I had not been paying close attention to the time, but I mean, we're
Well, you're gonna
running-
tie with Keith Proctor pretty soon.
we're,
You're halfway done.
Yeah, I had the
we're,
Oh my
we're running
God.
long.
I,
So,
I had the longest session, and that's only because I opened it up for questions and I got questioned for like 3 extra hours or something. And it was Tony asking questions.
I'm glad you didn't name me. So yes, so I don't know if you want to say, hey, let's call it off. I mean, I could do like a flurry of okay, let's look at the next ones we have, trying it in get into like super fast mode, or if you'd want to say, hey, let's take whatever is left and do some other session some other time,
Did we have the idea of releasing the poll post like when we put the video out so people could still take the poll?
Yeah, we could do that, I think, but it'd be somewhat limited in time because my Mentimeter subscription is not going to run year long. So
Oh yeah, but how long do we have?
a week or two, something like that. Yeah, because I enabled it earlier and did some tests with my other user group and things like that. So
That's right, huh?
I mean, I could extend it by a month. I'm just saying it's not going to be up for like 6 months is what I'm saying.
Oh no, I wouldn't do that anyway. I would just like kind of
Eric, he has 12
see if
left.
we can gather some more results, like if we run through this quickly.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So let's
He
see
has
what we
12
get.
left and like 2 or 3 are
Okay.
you
So
don't have to stop for.
How many
session
more do you have left?
identifier is something I have not been using. I don't know how
It's
people
expensive.
have using it, but for me, I'm like, it's one of those. Haven't been using it, and I don't see it changing. So unless someone comes up with like, hey, here's this really amazing use case, then I'm gonna say no, thank you. Add-ons using published add-ons. I did use one. I think it was the signature capture, and it was really easy to use. I was happy about it. So yeah, it looks like an even split here.
What was their rich text editor? I tried that.
Mm-hmm. That I think it's a Quill implementation. So so there we go. And if I keep running, so add-ons, making your own. On that one, I've listed a bunch of links because the documentation is kind of scattered, and I think I don't plan on making things as an add-on. I think the hurdle there for me is to say, well, once you publish it, it's not something that you can really update, right? People would have to uninstall and install a new version, and there's a bunch of complications that go with that. Yeah, changes to JSONSetElement and also JSON get, right? But here I'm just using plus and the colon to say, okay, I want to generate this array information where there's keys within. So I like that a whole lot, much better than having to.
That's standard for JSON then?
In FileMaker.
Yeah.
So just say, okay, I want to add a new array item. So you use the plus. And if you're saying I want to make an edit or read from the last item of my array, then it's the colon, right? So because, having to track in a counter type thing, and then to say, okay, put together the bracket with your counter and everything. It's not as pretty, honestly, in many ways. So love it, and I'm not going back is what I'm saying.
Hey, TechNode, Eric, I clicked on the link that you added to the help page. It took me to MakeArray.
To what? Oh,
To this
Right.
one. So yeah,
So it's-
JSONMakeArray is
Never mind.
also pretty neat, and I think the thing here is separator will support, I believe, more than one. So that's that can be really useful. So I did use it, and it's again, it's nice to have more utilities to handle JSON, because JSON is just more and more part of our day-to-day stuff. So there we go. And WebRTC support, again, introduced recently, something that is supposed to let you do very fancy things in a web viewer, like, you know, dial up a web conference or whatever with another user, but that's not something that I'll be rolling out.
So, Robert, I had to look this up, and maybe I'm
Yeah.
wrong. Is this, in the why do I care? What can I use this for category? Would this, for anyone who's looked at this actually, would this give you the ability to build like a chat system? Like, in other words, if Bob wants to chat to Mary.
Yeah, within two workstations yeah, you could do something like that.
Hey, Mary, you're locking the record.
It's also the reason why when you are installing FileMaker on your Mac, for instance, it now is asking you for access to your mic and access to your webcam, whereas before it was not prompting you for things like that. So yeah, it's I'm sure
I'm going to say will use.
there's a host of things that could be done, but I'll wait for someone to release an add-on on it. So using port 443 instead of 5003. So I guess that one is really something where it has to apply to you, right? So that's why in this one, the option I have something, well, not applicable, right? Because the infrastructure is just not in your hands, or
okay. So this
like
is for your
that, or-
client.
This is for
It's
your
something-
IS&T. Your IS&T is going to dictate whether or not you use 5003 or 443. And then your client doesn't even know or care.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
He
So what
logs
the-
into your
the advantage of
system.
using 5003 is you could restrict your average web browser person from getting to it.
Ah,
I mean,
Yeah.
people, I guess, could see pros and cons on both sides. It's just my understanding is there were some establishments, some institutions where, having something customized for port 5003 was just a deal breaker. People would say, use 443 or we're not even letting you in. And so now there's something in the product that lets us go that way. But if, for your existing customer base, 5003 has been fine. It's going to keep being fine, for the foreseeable future. So yeah, that's why I kind of said, well, it's not applicable to me, but if I was dealing into a situation where the customer was in a setup where using 443 was mandatory, then yeah, it would be a great thing. So
and
dark
Eric,
mode.
443 has to be fully specified. It's not just 443. It's FileMaker on 443. It's a full
Right.
protocol. So it's not quite easy to just use a browser to get into FileMaker. You won't be
No,
able
of course not. But I mean, like, if somebody just, it's just another way to firewall people, I suppose, I would think, to use 5003.
So dark mode, I don't know how people are using. I myself am not using it. I think it was introduced in stages because I believe like at some point it was said like, oh, now dark mode also supports the relationship graph. So I guess the rest was dark mode, but the relationship graph was still like the white background and everything. So my understanding is that the support for it is pretty much hardened. But I just like light mode better. You know, that's a very that's a
It's
preference type thing.
It's
So
a user thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Each
But I think it's
user-
ultimately less glare if you don't use dark mode.
So trigger for Claris Connect flow. So that really depends on if you are using Claris Connect or not. So at this point in time, I have not been, but again, we'll see. Like those part of the platform are constantly evolving. So maybe there are things that will change that. I think as it's being made more available for a larger customer base, you know, we may see more and more use of those components of the platform. GetLiveText or GetLiveTextAsJSON, the two are coming together because one is really just a tweak of the first one. It's a Mac only feature, and it does nice things, but I just happen not to have a business use case for it that would involve something my customers are doing. So don't know if anyone
Is
wants
that-
to.
Is that just a screen reader?
Pretty much.
Yeah, so you stop a video, you scroll over a bunch of text, and it gets it as JSON.
Haven't tried
I
it with
think it
video.
only supports images.
Right. There's an image on the screen, either a video or a photo or whatever. There's an image on the screen, you select text over it, and then you run the get live text as JSON, and you end up with the text.
Yeah, well, you basically can only use it on a container field, right? So you need to capture what you need to capture, and then insert it into the container.
Yeah, we're
And
being too specific, that's all.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
We're both saying the same thing.
Okay, yeah. So so yeah, I used it already. Okay, so
Mac only, right?
Yeah. And
so I think I used it on iOS before I used it on Mac.
Script donations for shortcuts on Mac. So obviously only for Mac. I did a demo of that in my other user group. It's something that looks great, you know, and you can tie in with like dictation commands and things like that. It's just, to me, it feels like you know, what with the kind of stuff we see with AI, things are going to take a different twist altogether. So I'm not sure that shortcut donations will be the way going forward, but yeah,
it's another way to automate things. So if you have a way to say, I don't know, put a database entry into a database when something happens, you know, like it's going to have to be database related, of course, right?
Yeah, if you have something, you know, from outside of the FileMaker running process, you know, and someone says, hey, I want this to happen, then they can trigger from outside of FileMaker. They can make something happen in FileMaker. So
so when the light on the outside of the house turns on, also trigger this script. Put a database entry, maybe capture a screenshot of the video, something. I don't know. Probably all sorts of weird things you can do with that.
Can you get it to open up FileMaker and open the app and actually do all that, or?
We're not opening it. The shortcuts is, and shortcuts already does all that. It opens up all sorts of apps, modifies them, tells them what to do.
Huh. Well, we'll have to see your demo someday then, Robert.
All right. And on window transaction trigger, that one, I was really having high hopes. And I think basically my plan was to use it, for attempting to know more about the search criteria that the users have when they're in the database. But turns out that they've banned its used in find mode. So yeah, it limits what you can do, and I know that it can be used to implement audit logs and things like that to know what has changed when you commit your records. It's just I don't happen to have a ton of customers who will say, hey, we want to know all of the edits and so on and so on. But it may be on one roadmap. Yeah.
This is interesting. We've disallowed the very thing that police and what do you call it? Medical experts want in their database solution. Because if someone's looking at some evidence that they shouldn't be, or they're looking at HIPAA records that they shouldn't be, you want to actually document the fact that, detective so-and-so looked at some record that he shouldn't be looking
someone's social security number that they should not have been looking at, or and the thing is, like, because it's tied to transactions, like even the reading part is not really something that you get to monitor. But anyway, I see Tony has his hand up.
This one, I read all the blog posts on this one that I could find. If I recall correctly, Beeswax and Soliant had my two favorites. You could pick your own favorites. I believe the winning feature is deletion tracking. So we use ultra-log type stuff. If you think about it, it's hard to track deletions. It's easy to, using what we've used for years and years, it's easy to track changes. Deletions are hard. And yet,
absolutely,
with this feature,
I totally agree.
With this feature, you can track deletions. This is maybe Vince has at his fingertips the excellent blog post that Beeswax did. But anyway, the ability to track deletions, easy.
Vince, what did you think of that feature?
I liked it at first, but then I didn't like it afterwards when I realized it would trigger all the time. Like it triggered so frequently that you had to work some logic in there that it would trigger, and then you would have to say, no, you don't need to log this because I want this to go through and not log it. And so we originally wanted to use it, but then didn't end up using it. We used some other method.
Vince, what about just turning it on for deletion scripts? I mean, I'm assuming, and I haven't rewritten our entire delete change log, but I've gotten as far as, for something like that, for a feature that we roll out to multiple customers, we'll almost always, when possible, do a little bit of a deep dive as to what an optimum implementation would be before implementing mediocre code at multiple locations. So this one looked at, and I was like, okay, what's new is the ability to, and if you look at the feature that Robert's got up on the screen, the script will be run after a transaction is successfully committed. And it gives you some additional abilities. And this is from memory because this was like a couple months ago. I believe you could pass it a JSON package. which could be a field, a field called JSON_CT, which could be a calculated text field, make an auto enter if you want, and that would have a JSON representation of the field and data structure that you're just about to delete. And therefore you have just tracked deletions, which I don't know if there's an easier way to do it. And I would just say don't have to use it for everything, but maybe use it for the delete. And if you've got the delete locked down behind custom menus or something similar, that to me is the winning feature. Haven't implemented it, but it looked extraordinarily promising to me.
Yeah, I mean, for a single record, perhaps, but then again, like you can't really be super selective because it's going to fire on all transactions being committed in all your windows. Unless you say, okay, this I'm going to go into a different file and then do what I have to do in that other file. But everything where it's, happening in the file where the trigger is on, you're going to have to kind of weed out, the false positives that Vince was talking about. And the other thing is, if you are building a transaction where you are creating 3 records, updating 2 other ones, and then deleting 5 records, well, you get all of that, right? Not just the 5 deletions. So there's some, there's some stuff that you'll have to work to say, hey, here's the stuff that I want to pay attention to, and the rest not so much, or things like that.
Yeah, you have to do it accurately.
I'm a bit confused by this. If you've done what Tony suggested, which is to tie the delete to your script, then why do you need a trigger? Because the trigger is your script being called. So your script gets called, you actually perform the deletion, you verify that the deletion occurred, and you log it away.
That's a good point.
So why is this feature needed then?
This is a good point. So it's possible that if you have a delete script that is appropriately, like your central delete, that's called as a subroutine. Like anytime you're deleting a record, it's called as a subroutine, that you could bypass the use of this feature. It's a good point. I have to think about that.
There could be that. There could be things also about, like, because the delete will delete any records that are up for deletion in a cascading delete. So I think the transaction will give you all of that. If you have a single script that says, hey, delete record, and then, I guess you could say, okay, first go and scan all of those related records and build up the data for it. But
you want the package to be recorded.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a million rows based on the cascading delete, now you're triggering a million record creations in another table.
Yeah, there's also the question of volume and performance and everything. That's a valid point. So yeah, OData API. I keep hearing great things about it, but it's one of those where I'm like, there's only 24 hours in any given day, and we've listed a bunch of features already.
39 on Mars.
So, I'm sorry, Mars?
Yeah, 39 hours on Mars.
It was a joke about hours.
Oh, sorry. 39 more minutes on Mars. So if you're running out of time, you can go to Mars, live on Mars, and you'd have 39 more minutes every day.
I see.
I did not know that. I've learned something.
Well, we better
630 something. I forget how many days in a year, but it's over 600. So
okay, good. Well, yeah. So I was just saying, at some point there's just too much for me to process everything and to make choices, and that's why I'm doing something where I'm saying, hey, let's see who uses what and see if there's something that is I've left aside that I should pick up or not. So yeah, I don't know if you have been using it or if it's something that is not. I hear great things about it, especially from people who say it it sets you free from the things about FileMaker that are kind of a signature that is not what we is not very standard in outside of FileMaker. So
Right.
things that say, hey, you have to make a query and specify a layout name, not a table, and those all of those things. So I think OData, the OData API does away with. So it's perhaps more convenient for if you're dealing with resources who you don't want to explain to them what everything they have to know about FileMaker to be making queries. But yeah, in my case, I just don't end up landing there. So
John Renfro did a five
Mhm.
1-hour presentations on using OData. I asked him if he could turn it into a one-page infographic. He said no.
Mhm.
Fired.
I don't know why. It's just squeeze.
I guess so.
Five-
Or maybe
5
you would
hours.
say, well, yeah, I'll do it on one page. You just need a
Oh,
magnifying
for a
glass,
long
right?
time.
He said, yeah, that
Prerequisite.
was with Richard Carlton for anyone who wants to deep
Yeah.
dive on that. Let's encrypt.
Yeah. So yeah, let's encrypt SSL certificates. I'm glad that it has been introduced in the platform. For myself, it so happens that the IT is just not really something that's in my hands. So I again over here I have the not applicable thing, but I'm sure like anyone who is involved with server setup, hosting, and then all of that, right, is something that is very valuable to. I mean, it was working before, but it was not, officially supported and everything. So
It
I
could
think it's a
break.
good thing.
It could break
that,
easy because Let's Encrypt has been known for not actually being secure, and it could
Right.
break when they fix actual things.
Okay. Well, I guess then there's a lot of people who are having issues if Let's Encrypt is not quite secure or could break, because then I mean it's not only FileMaker that is relying on it and leveraging it, but yeah, I can't really speak more to it. I'm not much into security for that kind of stuff. So get last error location, that is really something I'm thrilled about, getting to know script line numbers and everything. So that to me, the only thing I could be more happy with is like get script line number just as is,
Right.
so that I don't depend on an error to get
Well,
a line number. But
you'll need to know the version number of the script and some other information about.
Hmm.
I'm going to be a little contrary here to
Yeah.
say that if I look up this function, which I did in the past, I'll do it now. It's one of the things that it returns, I believe, is the line number. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's all swell and dandy. Now, if you're one of the people who never ever edits a script, like you never ever delete lines in a script, or you never add lines in a script, then the line number returned will be accurate. If I-
You're making my point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, go ahead.
You need version control.
Yeah.
You don't know the version number of the script, then
Kind of a big topic. What I'm doing now, working with the current product, is rather than rely on a line number, I'll just put a note. It's like, I mean, it could be semantic, like just about to loop. It could be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I mean, it's a swell feature. Whatever engineer over at FileMaker built this feature, good job. I'm not excited because
and I guess,
Yeah, I don't
when
think
your
it's
code is rolled
for
out.
historical purposes. It's like something you're working on right now, right?
Yeah, me, it's as I debug, I'm still working on the script, making it happen. I run it. I want to see what gets hitting the logs, and it says, oh, there's an error that happened here, right? Here may not be the same here in 15 minutes from now, because I'll be adding another 30 lines to my script.
It was intended for user logging. So it's meant to tie into the user logging feature, and it's not enough to know because it's the script name, the step name, and the line number. You don't know the layout and the record and all sorts of other stuff that you need to know. And I tried to get it changed before leaving. And
like one big JSON thing, or
well, those are the things we can get in some other fashion, and we can put the payload from last error location into a JSON and then build things that we want. But my point was simply that it's tied to an error. If I'm meeting something that I'm considering an error from the business logic end of things, right? It's not that there's something wrong with whatever FileMaker was trying to process. I still need something that gives me a line number, and I can't get that unless I force an error, which really feels like a hack. So yeah, that's all I meant on that.
So I'm going to agree with Keith that every time I've done any kind of script debugging, I've always, for a long time, I've thought that getting more information about the script is incredibly useful. I mean, if I was going to request a feature, I'd be like, get me the stack, get me the call stack. You know what I mean?
Complete context.
Yeah. That would be
but beyond that, once again, working with the features of the current product, there's a lot of get functions, and there's some design functions that'll give you quite a bit of context. And if you do that with a custom function that takes a single parameter called script comment, you're well positioned to use that custom function to get your robust chance at figuring out what the heck happened. Default fields.
Yes, the XML. So basically, you can customize, that default fields file on your workstation to say, every time I create a new table, here's what I want, in terms of the fields that get created along with the table. So I, just happen not to use it at all. I guess some people may leverage it. For me, I feel like it's not really something that should be a workstation preference. I feel like it's more like a solution preference or something like that. So I just end up, keeping snippets of the fields that I want to use instead as clipboard XML, and then when I need my default fields, I paste them in, and that's it. But yeah, that's been in the product for some time, and I don't know if people are using it. I'm not, and it so happens that it is that way. So
here comes a tiebreaker vote. Oh no, no pun inside. Yeah, I'm agreeing with Robert on this one. That snippets, I'm going to put in the fields that I want appropriate to the table that I am constructing, base table.
Very good. And that was the last slide of the slide deck. So
going back to last error location.
No, I have to go back.
From a conversation point of view,
I would create your own function, put this in it and the other things that you want in it, and call that instead.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm doing that. It's just the script line number is not something that there's no get function for that.
No, I said combining the two functions. So put other functions in it, call
Yes.
last error location, concatenate something together that makes sense.
Yeah. When an error happens, that of course is being done. Yes. But if you are absent of an error and you need to log something that involves, at what point this happened into the scripting, that's something where we're kind of short on having something that gives us a line number.
So I think you guys are actually agreeing. What I'm hearing Keith saying is say use get error location.
Mm-hmm.
Robert says use get error location. What Keith is saying, don't use just that.
Yeah.
In other words, go beyond. And and by the way, I just dropped earlier in the thread, I dropped dare I say, a custom function that I worked for quite a few period of time on that does what Keith has recommended appropriately. You want to know, I'll repeat what Keith said earlier. You want to know what layout you're on. You're troubleshooting. Is it helpful to know what layout you're on in FileMaker? I dare I say yes. So make it a custom function and call it with a parameter. Easy peasy.
Tony, I'm going to say, I think it's the first DIGFM session that is this long where I still have not heard you say like bread and butter.
Yeah, like I say, bread and butter. Yeah, no, and I would add one more point, which is that error trapping is a bread and butter feature.
There we go. Thank you.
Yep.
Wow.
Awesome.
So all right, we made it.
Thank
you did it
you
within
very
3 hours.
much.
Your other presentation in French, how long was that one?
It was a little over, I'm going to say a little over an hour, so maybe like an hour and a half or something like that. But I really,
double the length.
one, like people, in terms of exchanges, it was not necessarily as involved. And the other thing was that in terms of, like, as I saw, I was hitting the 1 hour mark. I really started pushing and flipping slides, one after the other.
This time you didn't do it until you saw the 2 hour mark.
So yeah, because it took me even more time to realize, because just we were having this nice conversation, and time flies. So.
So Eric, on your spreadsheet, some of your links don't go to the right spot.
Darn it.
One mentioned.
Yeah, I tried. I was tired.
It was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was at least one and maybe more.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good comment on the community. Just make some noise on the community. But anyway, all right, this was useful. A lot of interesting features.
I think everybody has access to write to it, so you can always.
Now we're talking, there's two things. One, there's the post that Eric did on community, and then there's the spreadsheet.
The same one. Yeah.
What's the same? I'm just saying we've
got the same links.
So let's make another copy, then we can edit it 3 different places.
Well, if you do the spreadsheet, I can copy it back over to wherever you guys want.
You know what? I think it's all good. Leave a little mystery out there in the world.
True.
Let people be reminded that the world is imperfect.
So yeah, Eric, if you let me know, what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to turn the existing presentation into a survey for people, who may be willing to look at the list of features and want to cast more votes, and then we'd be able to publish, any results that we got after, a set time, and say, hey, here's the end results we got. So
And
Just
if
let me know if ever.
where you have like 1,500 votes or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice. Oh yeah,
Then
so
you
can we
get that to FileMaker and say, hey, look at these features sucked and these features are really great. Can we have more of those things that are really great?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Also, the results that we have just from this, can you export those and share those,
Yeah,
or
yeah. I'll be able to export and send that over to you.
like a before and after, maybe? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to find where I
All
get
right.
my. And then with John Howell next month, I think, with his team, a whole team of people to present on. We don't know the topic yet, but
I'm sure it'll be related to the event that he's putting
oh
together
yeah,
in
that
some way.
yeah,
That's
he'll start off with that probably. He'll start off with talking about the event in October, the conference, and then he'll have a team of people talking about some developer interest or innovation that we might all be interested in as well. So
Eric,
so
I got my invite today at 5:30 p.m.
I might have done it. Well, I gave an extra invite. There should have been one previous, like over a week ago. If not, it's possible I invited too many people. I accidentally might have invited too many people this evening. It might have had a larger set because I normally only invite people who RSVP'd within the past year, and I might have actually accidentally extended that beyond. So.
Well, always include me.
Okay. Well, RSVP at least once. You can even put a no, and then you're on the mailing list for at least another year. So.
And if I'm too talkative, just let me know.
That was the extra hour.
Hey.
all right. I'm gonna head out.
It's hard to interrupt you because it's like, well, he's probably going to say something important. So.
yeah, he did and does. So Vincent is heading out. Vince, good to see you as always.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you.
Very. I know we're both on the East Coast, and I know it's almost midnight, so I appreciate you staying up really late and doing.
Yeah,
this.
but you used to be in Germany.
Oh well, I'm not there anymore. So that's I don't have to worry about that.
Nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
So yeah, if there's anyone who's going to be at Engage, like in 2 weeks from now, then see you there.
Oh, you're going.
For everyone else, well, we'll see you on other
you're gonna have to
meetings.
Share the new experience. Why? What's the new experience?
Well, you got a new head.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, we've already been experiencing that. So.
Oh. What's been happening there?
Maybe we turn off the recording at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Wait, where is the recording?
And let people know now we're going to start the part of the meeting you wish you were there.
Oh, pause. Stop the recording.